Welcome to Enjoying Your Time with God. We're back today, and on this journey of being a Christian, there are some things that God may reveal to you that you need to let go of. There may be a relationship, there may be an old habit, there may be some wrong thinking that are not in line with His plan for your life. And, whatever it is, God wants to bring you to a place in Him where you can't get to when you hold on to the things that He's asking you to let go of. And we don't always see the whole picture. We may not always understand why we have to let those things go, but God does have a purpose behind it. And so we can look at the example of Abraham in the Bible. Everybody knows the story of Abraham and Sarah, and they had Isaac. And he was we know all these things about him. He was called father of faith. He was promised a son, and in his and Sarah's old age, they finally did have Isaac. And then there was this crazy twist. God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. Now, to us, that seems completely crazy, because it's like, why would God ask somebody to sacrifice their only son, the son that He promised them? But, he was faithful. Abraham was faithful and obedient to that, because he even got to the point of giving his son as a sacrifice, and in the end God ended up sparing him. I think the way the Bible talks about it was basically right before he was about to stab him, God was like, no, wait. He just wanted to see if Abraham was going to be obedient or not, because that's what God is after. He's after us. We can become heroes of faith when we are obedient to the will of God, and that doesn't mean that we never mess up. It just means that we are obedient when He asks.
In Genesis 12, we read that right after God had made this promise, this amazing covenant promise with Abraham, that he was going to bless him, He was going to make him a father over many nations. He sets out for Canaan, and there comes a famine over the land, and Abraham flees into Egypt. And it never says in the Bible that that was in the will of God for Abraham, but it says that he went on and he took his family with him, and God was able to prosper him and to bless him while they were in Egypt. And he became a rich man through cattle and servants and all of those things. But that was never actually in the Bible, in the plan of God for his life. And I think that Abraham trusted God. I think that he came across a difficult time in his life, and he began to kind of self-manage at that point, because a circumstance arose that he didn't know what to do, and so he began to try to figure it out in his own plan. And I think a lot of times we as Christians do that as well. We begin our journey by trusting in God and believing in His word and in His plans and promises, and we know that He has a good plan for us, but then we begin to self-manage. And it's not that we don't trust God, but it's sometimes that we trust ourselves more. Because we can plan to do something and we can carry it out, but it's not the will of God for our lives. And so we begin to try to walk things out, and our path is not directed by God any longer. We try to do things in our own steps, but the thing with that is that we walk out of the power and the plan of God. And we begin to lose His presence. But an obedient and a faithful heart would say, God, I will trust you even when I can't see the next steps. I'm going to believe in you even though I don't know where you might be leading me. And it's out of an obedient heart that Abraham eventually came back to God and said, I'm going to trust you for this promise that you've made to me. And he experienced the promises of God in his life. And God doesn't force us to obey Him. He's given us a free will. That's what the Word says. But He desires that we would be found in obedience to Him.
The lesson we learn from this great story is that our mistakes don't keep us from His promises. When we come to Him with repentant and obedient hearts, we shouldn't take His grace for granted, but we also need to understand we can get right back into the will of God by simply becoming obedient. Our past doesn't dictate our future when we learn to obey Him. So today we want to challenge you to live in the place of radical obedience and see what God does in your life, in your career, in your family, and in your church. If there are things in your life that hinder you from walking, in complete obedience to Him, then you may want to consider letting go of those things. Ask Him to give you strength and willingness to walk in obedience and trust Him to direct all your ways. Of course, at the end of the blog, there's scriptures that you can meditate on throughout the day, and we hope that this really spoke to you about being in obedience to God.
Have a good day.